The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have another fantastic guest for you today, but before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and also Light Fair. May 2nd through 4th, we will see you guys there.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got a lot of information, all of our episodes, and information on the NAILD LSC certification, which is coming up this June. You should check it out if you're interested. Also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We could not do this without your support. MW Connect is the sponsor for this episode, and they are a fantastic resource. They really have been in the industry for a very long time, 40 plus years, award-winning Bluetooth mesh technology. They really are an excellent solution for your next project. Check them out, mwconnect.us. They have lots of support here right in the US, and you may know them as McWong, but they've rebranded as MW Connect. So check them out, mwconnect.us. But anyways, so getting into the conversation today, we have Yoelit. Yoelit, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Yoelit Hiebert. I am currently the Quality Manager at PLC Multipoint. I'm an electrical engineer. I've been an engineer for a long time in a wide range of different industries. Kind of came to controls in a sort of roundabout way, which I think might influence how I see things a little bit. PLC itself is a very small company. So in addition to my official title, which is Quality Manager, so I take care of all the quality aspects of the company, including our 9001 certification. I also manage R&D. I manage sustaining engineering. I'm the compliance officer and the webmaster. So I do all those things. It's a really fun job, and I've been with the company almost 6 years and really, really am enjoying it.
Well, you wear a ton of different hats, not just with your own company, but also in the industry. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about that too?
Oh, sure. Well, so I'm going to just spend a little time, if that's okay with you guys, kind of describing my journey. I started out, as I said, I'm an electrical engineer. I started out with Hewlett Packard in Colorado, in technical marketing of all things. And then my next job was at Boeing in St. Louis, which is my hometown. Wow. And I worked on, like defense stuff, most notably the Tomahawk weapon system program. That's where I got involved in reliability engineering. And that's where I really learned how to be an engineer. And so that took me to Hussman Refrigeration in their reliability department. Got assigned to this Tiger team, whose job it was to convert linear fluorescent lighting in our refrigerated display cases to LED. And so, as I said, this was in the 2006 timeframe, and I was put in charge of the verification program. So that meant I had to learn about what the specs meant. So, for example, L70 was just becoming a thing, and many, many people did not understand it. And there was some guidance coming out of IES, but it was pretty new. So that gives you an idea of where the industry was. I remember when we listed on DLC, refrigerated display case lighting was one of the first product types to list because of the environment. The lighting was able to meet the performance requirements because of the operating environment. And there was 6,000 things on the DLC at that time. Now there's probably 10 times that. I don't know, 20 times that. I haven't But that just gives you an idea of where we were at. We were all a bunch of engineers, had to teach ourselves LED technology. It was really fun. But because I was involved in verification, I was starting to learn about the IES standards, I asked to be part of the IES TPC, that's Test Procedures Committee for your listeners that don't know. And so I worked on a handful of standards on that committee. In the meantime, that project wound down, and I went to an energy efficiency program. And that's where I learned kind of the other side of the business, the commercial side. And also that led me, and I was like their LED guy, so that was my job on that program. And that led me to a membership on what was then the Energy Efficiency Committee, which is like, I think it's been 5 or 6 years, had been combined with 2 other committees to form what is now the Lighting Control Systems Committee, of which I am the vice chair. And then one more job change to the position I hold now at PLC Multipoint, where we make lighting controls.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's
and thank you. That's an awesome story. I mean, we always hear every now and then these stories of how people ended up in our industry. And I mean, it makes perfect sense. There's so much that needs to go into the thought and development of the resources that we use. And so, having people like you is critical to the success of anything that we try to do. And so, maybe something that's worth talking about it for people who don't understand, the intricacies of what you do on a daily basis. Maybe you could just share what is it like to be that, focused on such a specific piece to everything.
So could you be more specific as to
Yeah,
what area you want me to talk about?
totally. Let's just get into the testing committee, testing and standards committee that you were a part
TPC?
of. So TPC, yeah.
So their job, and I've subsequently relinquished my membership because my career has taken a different path, and now I'm in lighting controls, and so while I was there, which was probably, I don't know, 10-year tenure, maybe not quite that long, a bunch of testing standards got released or updated. I honestly don't remember what they were called, but they were all pertinent. You can look it up on the IS website, but they were all pertinent to the functionality, both short and long term, of LED products, which was not, the understanding of that also evolved as these standards were being developed. So it was a kind of dynamic situation, and I learned a ton about the physics behind LEDs, the optics, the long and short term, what you could expect, how you can extrapolate performance. So it was a really good technical grounding for me in LED technology, which even though I really enjoyed it, has unfortunately become sort of irrelevant's not the word, but not as important to understand, because now, of course, LEDs have been commodified to this extent that there's really not a lot to learn. We pretty much know everything. We've pushed the limit of where the technology can take us. And now it's all about form factors and stuff like that, and controls, of course, which are coming more and more into play.
And that's the natural progression, I would say, right there is, you transitioned over to focusing on controls and are part of the controls committee, which, one of the documents they're responsible for is LP6, which is a fantastic document, a great resource for people to utilize if they're trying to understand lighting controls. And so what was that transition like?
That was a deliberate decision on my part, actually. I perceived that lighting technology per se was sort of reaching its maturity, and I wanted to stay involved in the industry. And my assessment was controls was the next big thing, and so I actively looked for a position that would help me get involved in that arena. And there's been a learning curve, and there still is.
There's
I don't
always a
have,
learning curve.
yeah,
Yep.
I don't have a lot of the background of a lot of my colleagues where they've been doing controls for years and years and years. I'm fairly new. I don't implement um, like projects. So my involvement in it is more from a component aspect than putting something together and getting it to work in the field.
So, all right. So you mentioned lighting controls sort of being the next big thing. And I'm curious, do you still feel that way today? Because we talk to a lot of people, and there seems to be a sentiment that lighting controls is still very much in an infancy stage as we develop what the great big world of lighting controls is going to look like.
So yeah, I have a couple thoughts on that. First of all, I don't think we have much choice. And I don't know that it's just the utilities that are pushing it, although that's certainly helpful. But this is just the way we're evolving. Things are evolving sort of naturally. It's sort of an analog to what smartphones, which used to be, little flip phones, and now they're little computers in your pocket. And I think all technologies just naturally evolves to more and more sophistication. I do think there's some demographic that is not comfortable with that concept, and I think maybe that's where there's a hole. I think that maybe that demographic is really not being served as well as it might be, because what the industry is pushing is more and more sophistication, and maybe we need to offer, in addition to a Cadillac, we need to offer a little scooter, so that people who are not super comfortable with having everything automatically controlled and programmed, and they don't have any control over it, maybe offer them something that gives them more sense of security, but still helps them manage their lighting and their energy costs.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And do you think like there's a solution out there, or are we still kind of moving towards that solution to give them that security?
I think there's solutions out there that don't get the press, publicity that
Sure.
these full up super awesome installations get. Yes, there's definitely systems out there being offered by more than one manufacturer. We're one of them, that target toward the smaller user. Less functionality, less cost, and also maybe a greater sense of having control over what's happening in their facility.
Right. And so, yeah, kind of enabling people with that capability of really having that level of control. And that is along the lines of what we've talked about a lot here is having like kind of empowering the end users in ways that really enable them to understand their systems completely. And so from the IES perspective with the committee, are there things that can be done to help resolve that lack of awareness, that lack of marketing that's going on?
Well, the standards committee is just that. Our job is to publish a standard, and so one of the things we have to do, we're obliged to do, is not editorialize. We're providing information, best practices, guidance, but not saying this is better than this, or this is better than this, or think about this. But I do think the IES. Maybe the IES isn't necessarily the correct organization, but there certainly are organizations that, and I would say probably LC is one of them, that could potentially bring that aspect into give it more visibility than it's been getting.
Yeah, so the Lighting Controls Association, which you happen to be a member of the board, I think that that's a great resource to tap into as well, and in concert with what IES is trying to do, creating these standards, bring awareness to these sorts of technologies and brands that are trying to address these issues. And so I completely agree. So, what would be one way to resolve it, not just from a standards committee perspective, but just in general? Like, if you could approach the industry and say, this is a way to make things better. Do you have an idea?
Off the top of my head,
Yeah.
and I think your question is, how can we give more visibility to that demographic of users that doesn't want a full up installation with all the bells and whistles, but we still want to encourage them and help facilitate some level of lighting control to the degree
Right.
that they are comfortable. Because I really feel like a lot of it is just not being comfortable with it. People say it's cost or complexity, but my feeling is those are excuses for this discomfort with the implications. So anyway, I think, I know, and I'm not criticizing LCA, which, I love.
No.
It's been a really good experience. But we just recently, for example, awarded UNI Webster a citation. But there's no sort of analog to smaller installs. They're all big and impressive, and But what about the little guys who just need some control? And how do you recognize that? Recognize a user that maybe, I don't know, wasn't obligated to, but did it anyway. And what were their challenges, and what were their concerns, and what was the install like, and how's the the functionality going forward? How's it been? And just almost maybe like case studies. I don't know. I'm just talking off the top of my head now, but
no, these are great.
That might be a potential path toward reminding everyone that there's the market is big, and there's lots of different niches in it that we could be looking at.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I think when you start looking at the idea of simplifying systems or creating sort of stepping stones for clients, right, to kind of start to move them towards larger systems, that seems a lot easier to do in a retrofit application as opposed to new construction, where you have to meet code minimum standards. And I know code minimum is not, the most difficult thing to meet, but when you start talking about occupancy and vacancy sensors and automatic dimming near windows and things like that, those are the types of things, and not the sensors as much, but the automatic dimming and plug load control. This is where you can start to trip up certain users of different demographics. And that's where in a retrofit, you don't have to adhere to all of those standards. So are there any, obviously we can approach that from a retrofit, but how do we try and bridge that gap in new construction with the code standards the way they are?
That is a really tough question. I'm not sure we're going to solve that problem. But asking, like today, right now, but asking the question is the first step. Keep in mind, I'm sure codes vary significantly.
Yes.
So just because, this state has adopted the latest code doesn't mean this other state isn't like 3 versions behind or more.
Right.
So it's not as maybe daunting, or no, that's not what I mean to say. It's not as the code isn't necessarily requiring a lot of the stuff that these owners could be doing if they felt comfortable about it.
Right. Yeah, and so that I think that's a really excellent point, because basically we have this divide, which is something that Ron and I have talked about a lot on this podcast, where end users don't understand the technology, they don't realize the potential of the technology, and specifiers see the potential of the technology, but they don't really have any thing to lean on when they say you should try this out, because in some cases it's experimental, or, at least in the eyes of the end user, it's experimental. And so it's a risk. And the unfortunate reality is that's why we end up with code minimum as an approach, because it's like, okay, well, this is at least required. We have to do this. But then the additional layers just kind of disappear in a lot of cases, because it's like, well, I don't know, maybe is it really necessary? And in a lot of cases, it's not an expensive add-on. In a lot of cases, it's a pretty inexpensive additional layer that you can add to a project, but you need to add it early. You can't just tack it on at the end.
For sure.
So,
For sure.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
we really do need to do a better job of raising that awareness.
As we said earlier, controls. I really think controls will evolve just like smartphones, and speaking into your remote to get the channel you want or the show you want, all that kind of stuff. But it takes some people a lot longer than others, and sometimes it takes not having a choice, which is what the code essentially does.
Right.
But we want to accelerate that. We don't want to wait for like nature to take its course, And I think that that's an area that I feel like because I work in that area, that I feel like it's not getting the same amount of attention that these big, beautiful, implementations are getting. Yeah.
Totally. No, and I think that that's a really great idea. I like that idea of coming up with like a small scale award for projects that just do really well with lighting controls. It's not that it's like the most amazing experience with DMX color changing. It's literally just you did a really good job of a very small application of lighting controls.
You didn't have to do. Good job.
Right. Exactly. And I think, we do have case studies, but a lot of case studies do come from manufacturers as opposed to like an independent organization. And so we don't get that third party perspective when it comes to case studies. And that's not to say that the case studies aren't valuable that we have, but we just kind of have that limitation of information when it comes to, okay, how do we assess whether this was actually like top rate, 5,000 square foot office space, or it's just, okay, they met the bar and that's it. And so
Yeah.
I guess, from your perspective, it sounds like there's like a desire to see more innovation in our industry than we're actually achieving.
I don't know if it's innovation. I mean, I think there's lots of innovation, maybe too much innovation. We can hardly keep up with innovation. I think it's more of a like understanding or recognition that not everyone wants, that Cadillac version, and that being able to like flexibility or designing a solution that's appropriate for that where that customer is at, meeting that customer where he or she is at, and not where we would like them to be. I think maybe that's
interesting.
Part of holding it back.
Yeah, well, and where do you think the average customer is at right now?
That's a great question. And my perception is skewed, because of the area I work in. But
totally.
As I said, I think apart from bigger companies that are maybe more like, I'm going to say forward thinking, although that's not exactly the right word. Sure. I think the average, say, restaurant owner or retail shop owner or library system, they want something that will meet their requirements, but they don't necessarily know what those requirements are. And so again, to me, it all comes back to comfort level. and understanding their comfort level with technology, with how much control they have over what happens, with how hard is it to change something they don't like. All of that has to be sort of sussed out before any recommendations are made. And that for us, that comes through our reps. Our reps are the ones, we have reps, and they're the ones that interact directly with the customers and get the feeling for all of that, hopefully, before they ask us for that quote.
Yeah, and I was going to say it really is the job of sort of the rep or the designer, right? So from a theatrical background, there is no two jobs are the same. There is there is nothing generic. Every job is unique and different. And if we approached lighting controls the same way, and designers, and I'm really sorry to all the designers, stop copy and pasting. Stop copy and pasting. We can't treat every project the same way. There is no average restaurant. There is no average this, because every space is unique. Every owner's needs and wants are unique.
I think
Exactly. If we start treating every space like that, and that comes from the specifiers, the designers, the reps who are on the front end to help the designers through that process. And that's really what we need to focus on, is that it is so tough, because there is no average sort of customer, right? Everybody's unique and different. Yeah, and if we approach those jobs that way, I really think we can start to get out of this bubble of we just slam the same thing down everyone's throats when that's not what they want or what they need.
That's a very interesting comment. Seriously, I mean it.
Well,
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And that it's pretty much what we hear again and again with all of our guests is like, you need to think through a lighting control system design. You can't just kick it out the door and then be done with it. There's a lot of work that goes in, and the work that you're doing is the unseen, unsung work that people don't realize is done before they even have a product to look at.
Yeah. So, well, I like to think of myself as the infrastructure guy. That's what I do in the company. And yes, so you're right. A lot of what I do is in support of keeping the company running so that we can make the systems and components that our customers want.
Yeah, well, and I think the term infrastructure is perfect for that, because it's like infrastructure out here in Boston. The road system is the lifeblood of the city, and it's challenging. There's a lot of challenges to overcome with the Boston road system. I'm not saying that it is a cynical
Do you know how the
representation.
Boston road system got established? Somebody cooked some spaghetti and threw it on the wall, and wherever the spaghetti stopped, that's where the roads are.
That's what I really like.
A person who is not a native, that's my perception of Boston's road system. It's like, what on earth?
I believe that, but to that point, if without a good infrastructure, there is a lot of things that can go awry quickly. We have one car accident on an interstate in Boston will wreck the timeline for anybody trying to get from point A to point B. And that's just because there's a bottleneck that happens. So a good infrastructure will be able to help people navigate around those unexpected challenges. And so what you're doing as an infrastructure person is really providing a streamlined way of getting from point A to point B for the products and services that the company is providing.
I mean, it seems to be a good fit for my skill set. So
I would agree.
So it's like, who's the best person to do this job? And that's the person that does the job.
Well, it's not easy. It's not an easy job to do. And I'm curious if you would just, again, kind of let us peel back the curtain a little bit and see into that world. Because again, so many people don't realize how much work that is.
I mean, are you asking sort of like a day in the life?
Sure.
summary?
Yeah. Let's do a day in the
okay.
life.
Okay. On any given day, I may be involved in meetings for our latest R&D project, working on sustaining engineering topics, which may or may not involve meetings.
And just to define that, sustaining engineering is?
That's engineering on released products. So
Okay,
for example, if a part is obsoleted and we need to find an alternate, or we want to change a process because there's a better way to do it. So it's just anything pertaining to, or we want to evaluate something for use with one of our products, like a peripheral. So anything pertaining to released products. And then R&Ds are obviously R&D. I also handle research and development. Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, that's fine.
Mostly development, not research, but occasionally we get involved. And then I may be spending some time on dock control because as part of my QA role, I handle all dock control, which.
And just again, to define, our listeners are not savvy in these terms. What is
document control? So document control, and that holds a special place in my heart because to me, it's really the lifeblood of a manufacturing concern. That means making sure that production has the latest revisions of all drawings, bills of material, and any other ancillary documentation that is needed to build a product. And that can, I don't know, I just feel like that is so essential to building a quality product, having good dock control. So I do that. Every 6 months or so, we have an ISO 9001 audit, which maybe your listeners are not familiar with that either.
I would say so.
You would say no. ISO 9001.
I would say they, yeah.
They
please,
do now?
Please explain.
Okay.
No, they don't.
So ISO 9001 is an international quality standard. It is entirely voluntary, but a lot of companies won't do business with a manufacturing concern unless they have this certification. The certification takes a lot of effort to set up and obtain, and then there's audits every 6 months to ensure that the enterprise is complying with the requirements of the standard. So that takes a lot of my time, especially close to audit time. And then I'm the compliance officer. So that's been a journey. We're just getting a compliance officer. That means that I am like point of contact for all listings. So for example, UL safety listings, any kind of international standards like RoHS and REACH, should I explain what those are? Or?
You don't need to get into the weeds on those.
Okay. And so lately the buzzword has been restricted material compliance, being pushed mostly by the EU. And that is just a can of worms. The upshot is we as manufacturers need to determine what materials our various the parts that go into our products are made of, and determine if they're substances of very high concern. And I'm summarizing here a lot. And so it's been a very interesting, we're just getting started, and it's been a very interesting journey. I'm learning a lot about chemistry. So that's just like in any given day, I might be involved in any or all of those things, plus others as well.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, so I have a question. So you mentioned doc compliance, and this is actually one of those things, and I'm curious if that pertains not only to internal but external document compliance, because Absolutely. This is one of those things that drives Webster and I nuts. Is a lot of manufacturers are very bad about updating their online paperwork to match what they're shipping, and so when you know how it is, a driver changes, a component gets swapped out, and if that documentation is not updated, that can really hurt the designer, the integrator, and other people on the back end. So I was curious if you handle
So
both of
from that,
those.
from the perspective you're discussing, we don't really drivers pertain to lighting, and so
Yep.
we don't really, we do control systems. We don't
Yep.
provide necessarily, we don't provide like the materials list of our control systems,
Sure.
but we do, we do. So I should back up and say the decision to put things under doc control or not is an internal one, but most of our marketing collateral is under doc control, including our data sheets. And I thought that's where you were going.
Well,
I think
yes,
That's
data
definitely
sheets
part
as
of
well,
it.
for sure. Yes,
data
absolutely.
sheets I know can be very problematic in terms of being
Yes.
able to rely on what they say, but ours are under doc control, which means they're vetted before we publish, and we have them under rev control. And so what's on there, you can trust what's on there. And that wasn't a decision we made as a company, that we wanted to do that.
Right. Well, and I think that that's really critical because, to Ron's point, bad data sheets really do misinform and
Yes.
do not help the designers. So making sure that it's under doc control, if you have the scale and capability of having a doc control policy, that makes a lot of sense. And so it's a hard job, especially depending on how many devices. If you have a million different SKUs, that's a lot of stuff to vet.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy job.
I mean, I know this sounds like the most boring thing in the world to your listeners, but it's something like very dear to my heart, because you feel that it's the backbone of any quality organization, document control. So that's why
I agree.
Definitely, even though it's like the most boring thing ever.
I mean, personally, this is like warming my heart, because I am one of those people who will die on the podium of please document it. Regardless of how important you think it isn't, it's still important to document it. And so, but we're almost out of time here, so I kind of want to recap this, because this is so critical to the success of our industry. The role that you serve is really that role of an individual vetting and coordinating everything to make sure that it happens functionally in a concise and streamlined way and meets requirements. All of these things need to happen, and so many people make assumptions that work has been done, and that's not always going to be the case. There's plenty of groups out there, not just manufacturers, that just kick out stuff like documents that are not vetted, that are not ensured that they.
It's like products too.
Right. Well, sure.
Documents, products too. Yeah.
100%. I mean, these procedures are so critical, and again, it's so easy for companies of any kind to think, oh, well, we're making a profit, so we don't really need this level of oversight and assurance. And that's really problematic. That's dangerous in a lot of ways. Not dangerous in the sense that maybe somebody will get killed, but dangerous in the sense that your business model is really flimsy.
Well, and it does a disservice to all the rest of us, because one bad actor can skew a perception of a whole industry.
Yes.
And then we all have to take the hit, which isn't fair.
Well, and that might be part of why we have misinformation that travels quickly through our industry and unfortunately lands at the ears of the end user at times, because it's so easy to sell a product and get it into somebody's hands if you just kind of make up some stuff or don't fully understand it and just say, oh yeah, sure, it can do that, or yeah, that's fine. So if you don't have somebody behind that person saying, hold on a second, that's not true. Like look look at the data sheet that's gone through dock control. All of that stuff is really critical. So, I think that's something that's really worth looking into as a specifier, as a designer, understanding whether or not the company has good dock control. I mean, personally, like, I've never said this before out loud, but I'm realizing now that this is a really important skill, is that if you review documents and you spot errors in those documents, that's a red flag that there is something going on behind the scenes with the manufacturing group that isn't good. That the oversight has malfunctioned to some degree, and maybe it's because there's poor infrastructure in place so that the person reviewing doesn't have the time to review the document that they need. Reviewing a data sheet to make sure that it's accurate and updated, it takes time. It's not something you can just quickly scan through and be done. So
I think it's an indicator of the values of the company.
I would say so, for sure.
That feel like they want quality, they want to produce quality products, will take the time to produce quality collateral as well, or not. So,
well, and I think that applies to the design firms as well. Whether you take the time to actually design a lighting control system or you copy paste, that is representative of the core values of the. So, all of this, and so I don't blame end users who have a bad impression when they interact with groups that don't have this layer of oversight and don't value this quality, this expectation of quality. So, I think that is one of the things that at the core we really need to address in this industry, is ensuring that quality assurance is there.
That's a great idea. We should have a LCA could do an article or a course on quality systems.
Yeah, totally.
What all that stuff means and what to look for, and that might really be a good service, because the end user doesn't always have the wherewithal to be able to even know what to ask. Right. So yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah. No, Yoelit, absolutely fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. We kind of got on a tangent about dock control at the end, but it's so important. And I think this is one of those things that drives Webster and I crazy is documentation. And I mean, just super quick, Webster and I were in a class at Light Fair a couple of years ago, and one of the breakouts was take these documents from these various controls manufacturers and extrapolate the information about the system and everything else. And it was a great exercise for people to see what information was missing from marketing documents and from document sheets, but then also the terminology differences between manufacturers. And it was a fascinating exercise. Yeah. And it was like, for Webster and I, we're so used to it, but to watch some of these other designers go through this and realize they couldn't figure things out. It was just like, oh, there's light bulbs going off everywhere. This is amazing. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Like I said, I'm sure this is not the most fascinating discussion for your viewers, but I like what I do. So I hope
it was absolutely fantastic. No, it was great. You've great story about how you went from, your journey. And then this, I guarantee you there are other people yelling right now where they will be when they watch this about documentation control. They will be yelling at their phones, at their computers as they watch this. I guarantee it.
Maybe. Thank you. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
I will just close us out and remind everyone. Yeah, I will close us out and remind everyone that today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and also Light Fair. We are less than 1 month away, folks. We'll see you guys there.
And it's also financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got a lot of information, all of our episodes, and information about the Lighting Specialist in Controls LSC certification from Nailed. Definitely worth checking out if you want to learn about how to make sure that your systems are vetted. But also huge shout out to our sponsor, which we could not do these episodes without. MW Connect is that company that really does this kind of review. They make sure that their documents are aligned. They really ensure that this communication channel is secure and that they are there to support the projects that they're brought on to, because they want to make sure that that level of quality is there. So check them out, mwconnect.us, and see what they have to offer if you're unfamiliar with them, because it really is a reliable service that's worth checking out. Thank you so much for joining us. And Yoelit, thank you. This was such an awesome conversation. Even though you might think that it was boring, I loved it. So thank you.